for the Iran deal, an agreement he's blasted for years, calling it a disaster, among other things. Our European allies still strongly back this agreement, which could collapse if the U.S. withdraws, while critics cite very real concerns about trusting Iran.
The Iranians have been lying. Every time their lips move, they're lying. The Iranians were working with the North Koreans until just a few weeks ago on their nuclear program and their ICBM program. And the Europeans who simply want to keep things as they are for the trade value, the fact is, if we sanction them again, we ought to sanction anybody else who does business with them. That'll stop the Euros from helping to bail them out while they cheat on this program.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live with more.
John, good morning to you. Gauging the percentages between nix or fix, nix would appear to have the edge right now, though the president would still like to fix it the overall with a deal that takes care of everything that Iran is accused of doing: its short-term nuclear program, its long-term nuclear program, its ballistic missile program, and its destabilizing behavior. The White House is playing this one very close to the vest today. We do know that the president, within the last hour, spoke to French President Emmanuel Macron, and we understand that the JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was the centerpiece of that phone call. The president also spoke to President Xi of China this morning. The JCPOA might have come up, but that phone call, we're told, was mostly about trade and North Korea. Certainly, though, the president has made no secret of the fact that he does not like this deal, and indications are at this point that he will not sign a new waiver of sanctions, the waivers that he and President Obama signed every 90 days under the terms of the agreement of this deal, and that could begin the process of the United States pulling out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. White House Legislative Affairs Director Mark Short saying a short time ago here on Fox News that it would be no surprise if the president pulled out. Listen.
It's kind of hard to think that Iran is following the spirit of the deal. And so I think the president has been clear about his demands for a better deal, and I think that he will make his case to the American people today.
The idea that Iran is cheating on this deal took on new life after the Israeli prime minister last week laid out intelligence and evidence that Iran had a secret program to build a nuclear weapon. Still, there's a difference of opinion in how to deal with this in the administration. Mike Pompeo, the newly minted Secretary of State, John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, both in favor of pulling out. James Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, thinks it would be better to stay in. The president has also heard from our European allies, French President Macron a couple of weeks ago, and again on the telephone this morning, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister, all urging him to stay in and then seek a second deal to deal with those other three items that I talked about. Iran threatening to restart its nuclear program if the U.S. pulls out of the JCPOA. When he met with President Macron last month, the president warned Iran against doing that. The president also taking aim at former Secretary of State John Kerry after reports that he has been engaging in below-the-radar contacts with Iranian and European leaders about the deal. The president this morning saying John Kerry has to get off the stage. Quote, John Kerry can't get over the fact that he had his chance and blew it. Stay away from negotiations, John. You are hurting our country. The president has been given a range of options on what to do from his advisors. I'm being told that he went through a very methodical decision-making process. And, John, today is decision day, 2 o'clock this afternoon.
And we will have that live, obviously. John Roberts, our Chief White House correspondent, thank you.
Thanks.
New York's Attorney General resigning after a stunning report in which 4 women accused him of assaulting them while they were romantically involved with him. The Manhattan District Attorney opening a criminal investigation into Eric Schneiderman, who had been a high-profile advocate for women's issues and a fierce opponent of President Trump. Laura Ingle is live in our newsroom with more on this. Laura.
Hi, Melissa. Well, the details of the New York Attorney General's alleged misdeeds were revealed last night in a searing article put out by The New Yorker. 4 women alleged Schneiderman slapped, choked, and abused them while they were in a romantic relationship with him or had an encounter with him. Now, 2 of the women who went on the record say they had to receive medical attention after their encounters, which they described as assault happened. The NYPD tells Fox they have no record of any complaints filed by the women who both told The New Yorker they were too frightened to come forward because Schneiderman warned them he could have them followed, their phones tapped, and he threatened to, quote, kill them if they broke up with him. After last night's story broke, Schneiderman issued the following statement. In the privacy of intimate relationships, I have engaged in role-playing and other consensual sexual activity. I have not assaulted anyone. I have never engaged in non-consensual sex, which is a line I would not cross. Schneiderman resigned and stepped down, saying the allegations would be too much of a distraction for him to continue, after quickly losing the support of Democratic leaders, including Governor Andrew Cuomo, who spoke out this morning. Listen.
Change comes when people demand change, and change comes when the problem is revealed and exposed. That is always step one.
If true, the ironic twist becomes his role as an outspoken figure in the Me Too movement against sexual harassment, which angered at least two of his accusers. Also in 2016, his office published a Know Your Rights brochure for victims of domestic violence. And in 2010, when he was a state senator from Manhattan, he introduced a bill to make intentional strangulation a violent felony. Solicitor General Barbara Underwood will take over for now, and an interim replacement will be chosen by the state legislature, with voters deciding on a new attorney general in November. It goes on. Melissa.
Wow. Laura Ingle, thank you.
Thanks.
For more, let's bring in John McCormick, senior writer for the Weekly Standard. I mean, what a 24 hours. The allegations come out, John. The governor goes after the attorney general, and the attorney general tenders his resignation. It doesn't usually happen that quickly.
Not usually, but these were really some pretty horrific allegations for all the everything that Me Too has brought to light. The allegations of slapping, choking, multiple allegations, multiple people confirming that these stories were told at the time. Really hard to see how it would have played out any differently. So first, I think you just have to praise the victims here for speaking out and the journalists who helped them tell their story. You know, what one thing that it underscored for me is reading a part where one of the alleged victims says that her friends urged her not to come forward because Schneiderman was simply too important of a Democratic politician. And so that just really underscored the fact that, you know, the poison of partisanship or tribalism, it can really infect either party, whether that's Democrats who originally defended people like, you know, dismissed allegations against Bill Clinton, or Republicans who dismissed them against Roy Moore or even Donald Trump. So I think that is one lesson to take away from this.
Yeah, Trump, obviously no fan of Schneiderman. Schneiderman was going after Trump in court on several issues, but it brings to light this tweet that Donald Trump sent out in 2013. So we're talking 5 years ago. He writes, Weiner is gone, Spitzer is gone, next will be lightweight Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. Is he a crook? Wait and see. Worse than Spitzer or Weiner. That was put out on September 11th, which has its own hallmarks, of 2013. Do you know anything about what the now president knew then?
I do not. So you don't know if that was speculation or if he had heard a rumor or if he had heard something more than that when he put that out. What you see a lot of Democrats saying now is they're saying, hey, Al Franken for much less worse things, he's gone. You know, now Schneiderman for very horrific allegations is gone. What people like in Missouri, there are very horrific allegations against the Missouri Republican governor, Eric Greitens, who is refusing to step down. You know, they would point out that multiple allegations of, you know, sexual assaults against sitting president, Republican president Donald Trump. He is still in office, so I think that you'll have both sides, you know, pointing fingers here, but what really this underscores is that this isn't a partisan issue, that malfeasance can occur in either party.
And as you point out, hats off to Ronan Farrow, who is the guy who exposed Harvey Weinstein, and now it's the Attorney General of the state of New York.
Yeah, he's done a really excellent job. I think Jane Mayer also worked in this story. You know, without a dogged journalist to help these stories come to light, even with the bravery of the victims, you don't know if they ever would have felt comfortable enough to have spoken out. I think in many of these cases, especially the Weinstein case, that they wouldn't have. I think, and in terms of the political impact of this, you know, I don't know if this will have any impact on New York politics. Governor Cuomo spoke out very quickly, calling for Schneiderman's resignation. Cuomo does face a primary challenge from the left, from a feminist, Cynthia Nixon. So you wonder if this does sort of maybe alter the environment, the way people end up viewing this race, and maybe just think they're sick of the whole system and they want someone fresh. That this could have an impact helping someone like Cynthia Nixon.
Because the early polls showed her way behind, but that race is getting a bit tighter. So kind of interesting to watch, and we will be. John McCormick from the Weekly Standard. John, thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions with some very tough talk on immigration, what he's now threatening to do to those who enter this country illegally. Plus, CIA Director nominee Gina Haspel back on Capitol Hill ahead of tomorrow's confirmation hearing. Why some charge she's the target of a smear campaign by Democrats as the White House backs her to the hilt.
We want her to get a fair hearing, a thorough hearing, and we're very confident that not only will all of the members of the Senate see what the rest of us see, and certainly even some of the people that have held that position see, but that Gina is more than qualified to run and lead the agency.
President Trump's nominee for CIA Director, Gina Haspel, on Capitol Hill again today, meeting with senators before her confirmation hearing tomorrow. Senate Republicans vowing to fight for her.
We've seen one Trump nominee get unfairly smeared by half-truths and innuendo and hearsay, and we can't let that happen again. Ms. Haspel didn't ask for this fight, but if that's what it takes to get America the best, most qualified person to lead the CIA, we are more than willing to wage and to win that fight for her and the rest of the country.
Joining us now, Utah Republican Chris Stewart, member of the House Intelligence Committee. So she's going in front of the Senate, not your committee, but if you were voting, would you approve her?
Oh, absolutely. Look, she's an outstanding candidate. Her experience is really, no one else qualifies quite like she does. And once again, we're seeing many of our Democratic colleagues in the Senate who are obstructing and frankly in an unfair way. And it's very unfortunate. And they just got to stop. It's not what the American people want. It's not what they expect or deserve.
She has spent her career at the CIA. She was even a covert operative in the field. But the rub against her from a lot of people, a lot of senators, is that she oversaw sites where waterboarding was practiced.
Yeah.
How do you answer that?
Oh, my gosh. Look, so your argument is that she was overly tough on terrorism at a time, by the way, and this is such an important point, Congress and the Senate were aware of waterboarding. They authorized these extraordinary measures. Not only were they made aware of it, they authorized them. And now people are going back and they're criticizing her for doing what she was told to do by members of the Senate and by members of the Congress and the administration. She didn't envision this herself. She was authorized by Congress to do this. And the hypocrisy of some of these individuals say, well, we're going to hold you accountable for what we told you to do. And because you did what we told you to do, you're not qualified to lead the CIA. It's a nutty argument, in my opinion.
Yeah. Has anybody looked at some of the practices that, Al-Qaeda and ISIS and some of these other organizations put forward, in their treatment of their enemies?
Yeah, it's hard to compare, isn't it? And you've got to remember the context of the time after 9/11. I mean, you were sitting in meetings where Democratic leaders as well as Republican leaders were looking at administration demanding, you have to do something. This is a crisis for us. Do something to protect the American people. We didn't know what was coming next. And for people to go back years later and to be critical of those people who felt committed to protecting Americans and American security and to henpeck at these kind of things, look, we've made a different decision about waterboarding since then. That's probably an inappropriate decision. But at the time, it was a policy which the Congress had ascribed to. And again, it's nothing but it's just unfair to say, well, you're not qualified to lead the CIA because of that, when we know that she's one of the most qualified candidates we've ever put forward to be the CIA director.
It's fair to say, and I don't want to pick on John McCain. He's a national hero and he's undergoing treatment for brain cancer, but he is one of those who has said that waterboarding is torture, and we do not torture in this country.
Yeah. Well, and so we've made that our policy. but it was something that we were just kind of working our way through at the time. And we were working our way through it with a real sense of urgency. And once again, it's not like Gina is a person who came up with this idea and advocated on her own. She was just doing what was authorized and told to do at the time.
Very quickly, are you making any predictions about her approval?
Well, you know, the Senate is obviously very close, and you've got a couple of senators, Republicans, that are a bit of a rascal. You don't know what they're going to do. But I think if she can get before the full Senate, I think that she'll certainly be approved. I think there are beginning to be a handful of Democrats who are going to look at this and say, look, let's treat her fairly. She's clearly qualified. She deserves a vote, and I think she'll pass.
Congressman Chris Stewart, Republican of Utah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, sir.
That volcano in Hawaii spewing molten lava, swallowing everything in its path, damaging and destroying more homes after 2 new cracks open up on the Big Island. We are going to take you there live. Plus, it's primary day in 4 key battleground states, but all eyes are on West Virginia, where the GOP hopes to flip a Democratic Senate seat in November. What the candidates need to do to secure the nomination.
If you want to be nominated in a Republican primary, you can't really afford to get crossways with Trump. And so they're all trying to be the Trumpiest of the candidates.
Right now, primary voting underway in 4 key states that President Trump carried in 2016. Folks watching Ohio, North Carolina, and Indiana. But most of all, West Virginia. That's where Republicans hope to flip Joe Manchin's Senate seat from blue to red as 3 leading Republicans make their final pitches to voters, including controversial candidate Don Blankenship.
I think everybody knows that I'm more in agreement with Trump's policies than anyone else. So obviously they've told him some stories just like they've been telling West Virginians for years.
I think what he was really looking for is to send a clear message that we need somebody who can beat Joe Manchin.
Look, there's too much at stake for West Virginia. And for the sake of our conservative values, we must defeat Joe Manchin in November. Don Blankenship is not the man who can beat Joe Manchin.
All right, let's bring in Larry Sabato, director of the Center for Politics at the University of Virginia. So as this tees up, we're looking at these 4 primaries, 3 of them in states, as we said, that the president carried where they have Democrats now. That's the possibility of maybe picking up 3 seats if the right Republican is there, right, in order to run in the primary. Which ones do you think? Handicap those 3 races for me.
Sure. As you note, they're all competitive because President Trump did carry them, and he carried these 3 states handily from a large margin of 9 points to a gigantic margin of 42 points. So certainly they are potentially flippable, vulnerable Democratic seats. Now, Ohio is one where you have an incumbent Democratic Senator, Sherrod Brown, and we already pretty much know that he's going to be opposed by Congressman Jim Renacci, and that should be a close competitive race. There's every reason to believe that would be competitive. Indiana, there are 3 Republicans running. We don't have enough time to discuss all 3. I would simply say I don't think it matters all that much which one is nominated. I think they can be competitive against Senator Joe Donnelly, the one-term Democratic senator. But the day is really about West Virginia. That's the center of the political universe. And there, it's pretty clear to everybody, Democrat, Republican leadership, that the least likely to win in November is Don Blankenship. The other 2, Evan Jenkins and Patrick Morrisey, you could see them running a very close competitive race against the incumbent Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat.
Now, I mean, is that just conventional wisdom, or do you really believe that? Because Blankenship makes the argument that he's the only one that's beaten Joe Manchin. You know, he as a stuff we were looking at yesterday, he was in the lead. You know, if he's more popular than they are now, just being the devil's advocate, are you certain that one of those other 2 would definitely be better, and would either of them be better?
After 2016, I'm not certain the sun rises in the east.
Yes.
Okay, so let's just stipulate that right now.
Fair enough.
But beyond that, I would say that it's the considered judgment of people in politics on all sides that that's true. Doesn't mean it is absolutely true. I always tell people with conventional wisdom, the only thing you know is it's conventional. You don't know it's wisdom, but you know it's conventional.
On the Democrat side, are you watching that they're sweating out one race? That's the Ohio governor's race. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yes, that is going to be fascinating because Republicans have done extraordinarily well in the gubernatorial races in Ohio. They've controlled the governorship for 24 of the last 28 years. And they're probably favored at least a little bit at this point to continue that. The most likely nominee is Attorney General Mike DeWine, who also served in the U.S. Senate for a term. He's running against Lieutenant Governor Mary Taylor, who's John Kasich's lieutenant governor. She's tried to distance herself from Kasich, who's become somewhat unpopular among Republicans because of his opposition to Trump. On the Democratic side, Richard Cordray, who was Attorney General in Ohio and then headed up the Consumer Protection Bureau, he's running against former Congressman Dennis Kucinich. Kucinich is further to the left. Cordray is probably more of a moderate liberal. Cordray is considered the stronger nominee between the two.
Real quick, before you go, there was, once again, the conventional wisdom that the president's approval rating was very low. There was going to be a shellacking for Republicans in the midterm elections. It seems recently, no matter what poll you're looking at, the president's numbers have moved up. All of a sudden, you are hearing Republicans try and, wed themselves as closely as possible to President Trump. Is the tide turning?
Well, at the Crystal Ball, we've been very consistent, and we've consistently said it's way too early to know what the conditions will be when people vote in November. So those who said we were headed toward a shellacking were wrong when they said it. It would be equally wrong to say today that Republicans are sure to maintain both houses of Congress. No one can know. Too many things will happen between now and November.
Very true. Larry Sabato, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks.
President Trump about to reveal his decision on the Iran nuclear deal. If he pulls the U.S. out, what happens next? An in-depth look at the possible fallout. Plus, a slow-motion disaster unfolding in Hawaii. Molten lava destroying dozens of homes. Now there's a new concern. We are live on Hawaii's Big Island next.
It was devastating. Every road that you go down there in Leilani until you get to where the last eruption was, everything's brown, dry, desolate. No one's there except for a few people running around.
A state of emergency on Hawaii's Big Island after two new cracks open up as a dangerous situation continues to unfold there in slow motion. Mount Kilauea spewing lava and toxic gas, forcing residents out of their homes. So far, at least 35 homes and other buildings have been destroyed. William Lajeunesse, live from the Big Island with the latest. William?
Well, John, the Red Cross says there are 250 people sleeping in the shelter behind me, as well as the adjacent parking lots. They have nowhere to go. There are no hotel rooms either affordable or available. And longer term, most don't have volcano insurance. But the governor told residents last night, and I'm quoting, "Don't ask your agent if you have lava insurance. As long as you have fire coverage, we believe you're covered."
We are feeling sorry for the people who have lost their houses because we know some of our neighbors have lost theirs. So at least up to now, we are okay.
So the anxiety is that could change tomorrow, of course. The longer Kilauea is dumping lava into these neighborhoods, there are two new vents popping up yesterday, the more uncertainty residents face.
We are in Leilani Estates. Now, elsewhere, everything looks normal. As you can see, the lava flow has brought down the power lines, but look over here, and you can see where it's moved literally right next to this pole, and it has stopped just a few feet from this gentleman's house. Now, this is one of 10 volcanic eruptions within the Leilani Estates. Now, what geologists believe is happening is that the lake lava level up in Kilauea has fallen about 700 feet in the last few days. Now, where's that magma going? They believe it's traveling underground and popping up here in this neighborhood. Now, the concerning thing for residents here is their house may be here today, but maybe not tomorrow, and they have no idea when this is going to end.
So people are getting meals here at the Red Cross shelter as well as another location down the street. And John, people are really getting pretty desperate, and it could last a long time. They may have part of their insurance policy may give them loss of use coverage when they can't use their home. That may be some source of cash. Back to you.
It is unbelievable what's going on there. William Lesness, thank you.
Fox News alert on the Iran nuclear deal. In little over 2 hours, we are going to learn whether President Trump will withdraw from the agreement. The world now bracing for the fallout from that decision, especially when it comes to how Tehran could react. Joining us now is Jim Walsh, international security expert at the MIT Security Studies Program. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. You know, we've heard all kinds of chatter out of Iran, from, threatening to restart to, I think more interestingly, their foreign minister Zarif saying that it's possible they could keep going in the deal with just the European parties. What does that tell you if they were willing to stay in after the U.S. pulled out?
Well, I think, Melissa, a lot of this has to do with Iranian domestic politics. President Rouhani has been savagely ridiculed for the Iran deal in Iran. His critics are hardliners who say weapons, not agreements. And so that they're going after Rouhani. And so if Rouhani is able to stay in the agreement, I think that's what Iran wants to do, but that might be too hard domestically, politically at home, and they may feel out of pride or political necessity that they have to strike back, tit for tat. That's what people are worried about, is that once we break it, they will be free to do whatever they want.
I'm struck by what you said at the beginning there, that they want to stay in. I mean, doesn't that tell you that it's too good a deal for them, that they're getting something for not very much if they really want to stay in, even if the U.S. pulls out? That's what concerns me.
Well, Melissa, let me turn that back on you. By that definition, no deal would ever be good if the parties supported it. That's not how negotiations work. Deals survive when all the parties get benefits. Iran isn't happy with aspects of this deal. The U.S. isn't happy with aspects of the deal. That's why it's a negotiation. That's how you get a successful result. Our own intelligence community, the Defense Department, State Department, they all say Iran is complying with the deal. That's what IAEA says. That's good news for us if they're not expanding their nuclear program.
Well, let me turn that back on you, because I too studied game theory and negotiation, and both sides are supposed to walk away from the table feeling chafed. They're supposed to feel like they each lost something and not be so happy that if the other side leaves, you want to stay. I mean, it concerns me that they're getting the economic benefit and they're not sticking to what they're saying. I mean, you talk about them sticking to the deal. They have twice. The IAEA has said they have too much heavy water. They shipped it out. I mean, what do you think about the evidence that they just changed the name of their nuclear program and kept those documents somewhere else? None of that's compelling to you?
Well, no. Why? Because, as I said, the director of intelligence for the United States of America has testified in open session that Iran is complying with the deal. So has the Secretary of Defense. So has the Secretary of State. So has IAEA. Everyone says Iran is complying. Everyone says Iran is complying. The complaints about the deal that people have...
Well, not everyone. I mean, certainly Israel doesn't.
Well, Iran's behavior outside of the deal, that's what most of the critics have focused on. But no one, not even Israel, presented any evidence that Iran is not in compliance. Everyone agrees on that.
Well, I mean, they did say that at the beginning of the deal they were supposed to come clean about whether they had a plan or not, and they said that they didn't have a nuclear program, and clearly the documents show you they did. But I understand your point. Do you think that, if you can see the point that nobody likes what's going on outside, especially their ballistic missile program, should that have been part of it, and isn't it wise for the president to try and press to include that now at this point?
Well, I would say no. And as I say, most of our allies, that's why Boris Johnson was here yesterday pleading with the president. We have a UN security, this isn't a U.S.-Iran deal. This is an international agreement. And there's a UN Security Council resolution, international law that has established this. We just can't pick up our toys and walk away because we've changed our mind about it. We are the one, if Iran did this, we'd call it cheating. And if this deal falls apart, I assure you it's going to be more difficult, not less difficult, to address the missile issue, because Iran's going to feel more threatened. And as I said, the hardliners there are all about the weapons, not agreements. So if that's the group that prospers here, I think the missile problem is going to get worse, not better.
Well, much like with North Korea, we will see. Thank you, sir, for coming on. I really appreciate your insight. We'll see. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa.
Well, the White House promises strict enforcement of immigration laws. Attorney General Jeff Sessions unveiling an aggressive push to crack down on illegal immigration, including possibly separating children from their families. Our political panel is here to break it all down.
I have put in place a zero-tolerance policy for illegal entry on our southwest border. If you cross the border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. It's that simple.
George Zimmerman heading back to court today, this time charged with misdemeanor stalking after allegedly threatening a private investigator. According to reports, Zimmerman called the investigator 55 times, leaving dozens of voicemails, texts, and emails in a 9-day span, including a threat to feed him to an alligator. The investigator was working with a production company doing a documentary about Trayvon Martin. Zimmerman was acquitted in Martin's shooting back in 2013. He will return to court on May 30th.
Tough talk from Attorney General Jeff Sessions. During a visit to the U.S.-Mexican border, Sessions unveiled a zero-tolerance policy, saying authorities could separate children from parents if they enter the country illegally. The Attorney General issuing a warning to anyone who breaks the law.
If you cross the border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. It's that simple. If you smuggle illegal aliens across our border, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law.
Joining us now for some political discussion, Alex Conant, former communications director for Senator Marco Rubio and a partner at Firehouse Strategies. Also with us, Dave Brown, former senior advisor to Senator Patty Murray and a Democratic strategist. Thanks, both of you, for being here. Dave, I know you have a problem with this approach announced by the Attorney General. What is it?
Well, look, John, I think we can be tough on immigration, and we can ensure we're enforcing our immigration laws, but we can do so in a manner that is humane and is consistent with American values. And I've got to ask, what kind of people are we if we tear children away from their mothers at the border, or if we turn away a family fleeing from religious persecution and seeking political asylum in this country, and if they return, they're facing certain death in their home countries, or dreamers who are being sent home after years of living in America, paying their taxes, being contributing members of society. What Jeff Sessions announced yesterday, these aren't American values. I think they represent the worst of us rather than the best of us.
Well, first of all, he did say may separate children from their parents, didn't say it would absolutely happen. Alex, give us your take on these policies as announced by the Attorney General.
Well, I think some people assume that Jeff Sessions is doing this because he doesn't want Donald Trump to fire him. Obviously, President Trump has been very critical of the Justice Department and the Attorney General. But I worked for Marco Rubio in the Senate, as you said, in 2013 when we tried to fix the immigration system. And Jeff Sessions was the top opponent of that. I mean, he believes what he was advocating for on the border yesterday. He's a hardliner on the immigration issue. My hope is that these measures by the President, by this administration, will put pressure on Congress to finally fix the problem. Look, we have a broken immigration system. The reason people keep pouring into our country is because we need to do more on border security. But we also need to modernize the legal immigration system. We finally need to deal with all of the undocumented people that are currently in the United States, including the Dreamers. That is Congress's responsibility, not the President's responsibility. Yes, it takes presidential leadership, but my hope is that as Congress sees what the administration is doing, they will take matters into their own hands and finally pass long overdue legislation to modernize our immigration system.
Dave, you talked about religious persecution. Do you honestly believe that the people who are in that migrant caravan that came up from Guatemala and Honduras and so forth, that they're fleeing religious persecution and not just looking for economic opportunity?
Well, John, I'm glad you brought up the caravan because I think this has been one of the most disgusting aspects of this debate, the way in which the caravan has been misrepresented. These are people who are following our rules. They aren't trying to enter across our border illegally. They are presenting themselves to border agents, and they are petitioning for asylum. And to answer your question, yes, I think some are facing religious persecution. Others perhaps are fleeing, extraordinary violence, quite a bit of gang violence in those countries. But it also begs a broader question about prosecution priorities. Why isn't Jeff Sessions and this Department of Justice focused on organized crime, drug interdiction, the types of issues that actually should be a prosecutorial priority for this administration, particularly on the I-5 corridor, which stretches from California all the way up into British Columbia. So again, I think I actually agree with Alex in much of what he said. And what's sad about this debate is it's about politics for the president. He's not interested in actually finding a comprehensive bipartisan solution to immigration. It's politics. Ahead of the midterms, he's trying to rally his base.
Well, there is terrible gang violence in Honduras and Guatemala and places like that. There's also terrible violence in Venezuela or in Brazil. I mean, you can't open your doors to the entire world, I think, is the argument. Alex, your take?
Well, I think there's always room in America for asylum seekers, and I think that there are people that are legitimately troubled that under the current administration we're taking far fewer refugees than we have in the past. But the fundamental issue here is that our legal immigration system is broken, and that puts pressure on all aspects of America's immigration system. And I give credit to the Trump administration for enforcing laws that the Obama administration simply ignored, and for the Trump administration sending National Guard troops to the border, doing what they can to put pressure to fix our broken legal immigration system, to fix our border security problems. However, at the end of the day, it requires congressional action. I hope that President Trump puts more pressure on Congress to act and tries to make a deal. I think this is a real opportunity for President Trump to be the first president since Reagan to fix our immigration system.
Yeah, Dave, Democrats had the White House, the House, and the Senate in the early years of the Obama administration. Didn't do anything then. Why not?
That's right.
Come on, John. I was with Alex in the Senate in 2013 when the Senate passed, again, bipartisan immigration reform. And you'll recall Paul Ryan and John Boehner and others in the House wouldn't move it.
But they didn't do anything.
You had Democratic control of all three bodies.
Again, when we focused on trying to solve the Dreamer issue, I mean, Alex, I'm going to hold you to this. We have sought to work across the table for many years now. These are hard issues. For some on the right, they are intractable issues. They simply don't believe in any kind of immigration.
No, this is
so I think it's disingenuous to say the Democrats haven't been focused on these issues.
This is a real pet peeve of mine because when President Obama was elected in 2009, he did nothing on immigration reform for the first 2 years. It was only when Republicans took over, he played politics with the immigration issue, including the docket.
He makes a secret trip to China. What we're learning about his latest meeting with the president of China ahead of a highly anticipated summit with President Trump.